You don't want to hear that whole story, do you?
I remember really like the guitar player that went on to Giant Fetus. He was such a nice guy.
No, Mike was cool. Mike was their guitarist. So I had
But
no problem with Mike.
even to this day, as much as I've kind of opened up to extreme music, I don't like hardcore, like I don't like real gore imagery. They
No,
use a lot of like the footage, like the Faces of Death album cover stuff. I was like, nah, I'm not for that.
that came from that all started with Carcass.
Yeah, oh yeah, with their
Carcass did it.
Corporal
They had up
Jigsaw
to that
quad.
point. You had bands that were just doing ridiculous little magic marker drawings that their friends did,
Mm-hmm.
like Repulsion, like it was like this rotting head and all of that stuff. So that was fun.
Yeah,
Carcass made history by having forensic lyrics and forensic album covers with collage of autopsy photos, including babies.
I'm not even totally against like the car. It's when there's like, oh, we found photos of like murder and torture, and we're gonna put, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but the
So
whole package with Carcass is speaking to you and giving you a point to all of it, as well as
yeah,
on the
'cause they're
second
vegans.
when they started, yeah, because they started putting animal parts in there, so you couldn't tell what was what, and that was their whole point: is do you really want to eat dead things? So,
Yeah, because on the inside we're all the same. It's
but I
kind of
feel the same way. Like there were bands
beautiful
that,
message.
yeah, they're that, yeah. I mean, that was cool, but it was also just so extreme and brutal, and just took people off guard. It was like so early in the scheme of things that it was
Mhm.
just like crazy over the top, like the lyrics and the imagery. But
That's actually kind of an interesting topic right there. We just kind of like the origins of the gore element of metal. So there's,
yeah, but there were other bands who would just try and copy that, and like all they did was just like do the same thing, like just find some autopsy or just gore photos and just slap it
Mhm.
on. See, Disordered, that's kind of what they wanted to do. And the picture they originally wanted for the cover of the CD, this
Mhm.
would be Matt, the singer, more than anybody else, is they wanted, it was a picture of a guy wearing a long sleeve shirt, pants, sneakers, sitting on this couch. It was like some old 80s photo. And it had the whole living room, but he's holding a shotgun and his head was just like pulp.
Uh,
That was the
yeah,
picture. I'm like, well, that's dumb. It's just a guy sitting in a chair, but his head's pulled. I mean, I get that it's brutal, but if we're really going to do that, let's close up on the head. Why you have a picture of a guy sitting in a chair? It's just kind of silly. But then you see the. So I talked him out of it, and that's what the cover is now of Disordered. The CD that I originally did is like a big zoom in close up of some dude's head that's pulped by a shotgun.
yeah,
And of course, the
yeah. I don't
inside, we did like one rotting head. We didn't go crazy and do like a billion pictures, and
know.
all the bands do that. All those gore bands.
Yeah, I just didn't like the that it was a real, like I was like,
Well, that's it. I mean, well, Carcass was real people too, but it was
but it was kind of, but like you said, it was like a forensic sort of angle. So in a weird way, it was almost medical. Like
it was tastefully done in a
or
sardonic metal way. But
I don't know if tasteful is the word I'd actually use on it, but it'd be
what sounds better right now than a burger? While you look at Carcass's album,
it's not that I'm like super squeamish. I just don't like suffering, and
not saying like just eat a burger and like you read their message of like
oh yeah.
vegetarian and such. But
Well, speaking of Carcass, did you ever have you heard anything from the new album? Just curious what your thoughts are on that.
I have not. I think I saw a video floating around on Facebook. I heard,
Yeah, the animated one.
and I noticed that it was like I don't remember what the song was, but I noticed it was a lot rougher sounding.
Yeah, no, it's very
Like they finally got that heartwork shit out of their system. It's still
yeah,
fast artwork and thrashy, but it's a little
it's
bit more.
thrashy, but it's almost like um I heard I forgot the singer's name, but I heard him describe it as almost like dad rock. So there is almost like a Allman Brothers Leonard's, kind of a groovy element to it that I really like actually.
I have not heard that. I don't know if I
Yeah,
would like that coming from Carcass. See, that's my point. And I told you I met Carcass,
it's
right?
makes total sense. So like
I told you I met.
you did. No, I
Yeah, it
didn't
was
know
a long time ago. It was on the Heartwork tour. First of all, they were touring with Death and Pestilence back in the early
that. Oh, wow.
'90s. That would have been awesome. And that show passed us by. Went to Denver. Not a fan.
Cephalic Carnage.
Not a fan.
Well, they're all Colorado. Well, I'm just saying,
Undertaker was good.
Wasn't Dallas Brown the singer of Undertaker? No, he was not.
I think he was.
Oh, was he?
Speaking of Cephalic Carnage, getting off the topic of Carcass for a minute, is when I started my label under the name Suitech Productions, which I now have again, but it's dedicated to ambient music instead, industrial. But back then it was the metal label, and one of the first two bands I did was Disordered, and the other was a band from Salt Lake called Catharsis. Not Catharsis, Catharsis. So I don't know if they didn't know the word or if they purposely did that, because there's been like hundreds of catharsises.
Yeah.
And anyways, their album cover was a close up of bong water. It was just green, foamy liquid stuff. And if you read their lyrics, they even have a song called Cannabis Death. And they were the first ones to do this early grindcore death metal stuff with that stoner edge to it, way before Cephalic Carnage. So
really? So they were the first.
Bong it, buddy.
Well, then there's you have Cannabis Corpse. There's another stoner death metal.
But first of all, I don't give a fuck about weed because I don't do weed, never have, don't give a fuck. I don't have any inclination.
I don't care about it, but it is a cultural thing.
Well, that's all the more reason why I don't want to do it now. The more I see the people who do it, it's like, you're fucking stupid. And why do I have to do it to be with you? Because you want to go fuck yourself.
You don't have to do it to be with me.
Then fuck you. I don't want the metal then. Fuck off. Anyways.
Well,
yeah.
I think we both agree stoner metal kind of sucks. But
I don't love stoner metal, but like stoners, the people, like whether they're in the metal or it's just it's annoying because they always try to get you to do it, especially because you haven't done it. It's like, what? Be like jobless and have my mouth hanging open and like have no mouth that shit. That's how I see potheads. Sorry.
Well, it's a very Nancy Reagan outlook on drugs you have there.
Say that because I just was explaining to some of the kids at work the other day about that. They're like, Nancy Reagan. I'm like, yeah, she's the wife of a former president. And I said,
just say no.
You know, it's like I remember the commercial. It was this guy like harassing this little girl walking home from school, going, "You want pot? What about PCPs?" This dude in the car has got everything apparently with the camera filming this girl, going, "No. You want some smoke? Smoke some crack? No. What about some speed? No. Just say no." That was the fucking thing.
That's so funny, dude. Because that literally never happens.
It was stupid as fuck. And like, it's like, yeah, just say no. That'll fix it. Anyone who doesn't have an iron constitution like I do is immediately going to be doing drugs or cigarettes. That's why I didn't do it. Because I was purposely like, fuck you. Fuck off. I'm not part of your little cadre.
What if they were all convincing you to be sober? Would you start doing drugs just as a
well, that's also interesting.
A rejection of that,
like shit in Utah, you know. I mean,
mm-hmm.
Not that means anything because this is actually there's more drugs here than anywhere else in the fucking country.
I know. Well, they say that, but I sure have a hard time finding the ones I need.
Oh shit. Well, they're there. But it's a common restaurant industry theme is people at least smoke cigarettes, if not beyond that, alcoholic.
I don't know what that is. Well, I'm assuming that it's just a stressful industry, which is probably why it shouldn't be.
I thrive on that, and that's what I do is I eat up the stress, and that's what you do in that kind of job. That's the thing, and like it powers you to go faster and do better. Like that's how I see it. And like if you're stoned as fuck and come to work scratching your balls and you're tired, how are you going to perform? That's why I make fun of all these guys.
Exactly. But that's why you need to supplement your weed intake with speed.
Speed?
Yeah, man.
So this is our first podcast. You're recommending what drugs people should be doing?
Well, yeah. I mean, people should use speed.
What is speed?
Amphetamine. I mean, it's Adderall, basically. Yeah.
So it's not like a powder or something or whatever.
I mean, you can snort it if you want, but.
What does it mean? What is speed? What does that do?
It's an amphetamine, so it's like a neural stimulant. You know, it gets a bad rap because
just take an energy drink.
Because that energy drinks are more of a cardiovascular stimulant. That's what's bad for you.
Well, that's if you're doing the bad ones.
But I do both, so.
Oh shit! So you got one foot in the grave already. Fuck.
No, dude, I had one foot in the grave when I turned 40.
Oh,
Um,
shit.
no, I mean, but
I'm
I
12
take
years older than you, and I don't have one foot in the grave. I am the grave.
you look great, man. No,
Oh,
I take Adderall as prescribed by a doctor, but I also will drink a 5 hour energy drink every once in a while too. But it's, to me, it's just like I think everything has like can actually serve some sort of useful purpose. It's just everything has the potential to be abused as well. But I do think it's funny that something like meth gets such a bad rap when Adderall that's prescribed to like 12-year-old kids is literally meth.
oh
So
yeah, we know that. Like that was a thing.
yeah.
So, and it's funny bringing this topic up, like as it relates to metal. The more extreme you get, do you need stimulation from drugs? That's my question to you, as a person who uses certain drugs.
No, I mean, to me, I don't use it for any kind of extremity. I use it because
Well, I don't mean that. I mean
I
that's
can barely
my point.
function without it.
Because most people do drugs, say people who listen to music, counterculture in the 60s and the 70s and all of that, that's what they did it for, was to get loaded, just chill back and listen to King Crimson or whatever. But you
Well,
need that when you're listening to Napalm Death, like a whole full album of like 40 songs that are 1 minute each or less. I mean, do you need that?
no, no, not necessarily. So to me, there's uh, a couple of things that drugs, as far as relation to music. Um, One, they're they can, they can actually help with creativity. There's a reason why some of the best jazz music made, in the late 60s and 70s was done by just heroin users. There is and then, but you got to understand though that it's very quickly you start getting diminished returns on that creativity. So you'll have a period of using where you're highly creative, but then that starts to almost reverse itself. If you become, if you just become an addict, you know what I mean? So I think there's creativity enhancing aspects of it, especially with some psychedelics.
Well, that would be the case with anything, wouldn't it? I mean, especially drugs, I guess. But I mean,
So with believe it or not, so like
decapitated listening to this like extreme double bass, like this total like triggered, like extremely produced death metal that's like clear and clinical, but really heavy and fast. Like,
yeah.
whole
So
point of getting high and getting like all gel headed.
pro- probably not, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of those people achieve. So I was going to say, like, so with me, Adderall doesn't necessarily like help with my creativity, but it does help with me like sitting down and focusing on the instrument. You know what I mean? So someone who's maybe is wants to achieve like a certain level of technical ability, you know, it might help them to take some Adderall and then sit down and practice their scales and things like that. So it can help with that mechanical aspect of it, but it probably won't help with your creativity. But it may get you focused long enough to get to a certain level of and I'm not actually encouraging the use of it, but I'm just saying that as for me, it's hard for me to sit down and just practice, because I hate practicing. It's boring, So if I want to improve, I need to be kind of have a mind like be in a frame of mind where I'm okay just focusing on something sort of rudimentary. And certain drugs can actually help, just take the tediousness uh, away from certain things like that. But like I said, I mean, it can all be abused. It can always have an opposite effect too. I mean, like you said, I mean, you get those people that smoke so much weed, they can barely string two sentences together. It's not helping their creativity. Um, but like I said, I mean, if it's used with certain intentions, I think almost any drug out there could probably serve a certain purpose
So there are
artistically.
genres that use
Huh?
drugs, and there are those who don't. So who do you think is the genres that use drugs? I'm going to have to say black metal, of course, stoner doom, obviously. What about grindcore like Napalm Death? I can't see them doing cocaine or even marijuana, to be honest.
I could see them using weed. I mean, I think, but I don't,
I guess
I don't think drugs are necessarily tied in with a certain genre of music. I think, so for
well,
example, like,
because you got certain like people who like do them more. I don't know. Like
well, so okay, so like the first, so that
I
you
can
know the
see
band,
black metal guys. Like I know black metal guys. A lot of them do cocaine and like worse drugs than that. And
yeah, because for a couple of reasons. One, to play that hyperactive, blast beats for a full set. It probably helps them on that, and it probably it probably helps them like kind of from a vibe standpoint because it does give you that like a very it can make you a little more aggressive, just emotionally or psychologically aggressive in some people. But I was gonna say like the band Cynic, right?
yeah,
I would say that a lot of their music from day one has been influenced by DMT, but it's the spirituality aspects of it. You know what I mean? When when uh, when people do something like ayahuasca or DMT, there's very much like a spiritual intent to it. So that's why the cynic stuff is very new agey. You know, kind of has that South American shaman kind of thing going on. So there's a spiritual aspect, I think, too, to certain uh, chemicals. So so that's why it's like it's hard to like really specifically insert any drug into any genre. It's an individual sort of proclivity, I suppose.
an individual proclivity. So
Because I know, like I can't even play if I'm on weed. Like I've tried playing guitar, and it's just like my brain can't communicate with my hands. It sucks. I hate weed for just probably opposite reasons as you. It's not the culture of the people who do it. It's the actual effect it has on me. It's not fun to me at all. So I just avoid it.
that's very strange. Everybody I know acts like it's the greatest thing ever, and that's how
It's,
people like approach me who don't listen to metal. Like, well, how do you
it's not.
listen to this kind of music? Don't you want to be like, well, I don't know, chill? I guess is the term now, but I'm like, no. In actuality, it's not about relaxing and listening to music per se with metal. For
Yeah.
me, it's
Well,
aggressiveness, and that's why people are like, why do you like this music? It's like, well, it's aggressive, number one. Number two, you listen to it when you're driving, you listen to it when you're at the gym, you listen to it when you're house cleaning or you're painting your house or whatever the
mhm.
fuck.
Well,
And
and you can't listen to it passively. That's kind of what's great about metal. I mean, I like chill music, and I'm sure you do too. You probably throw on some whatever, your kind of your trance music and shit like that,
well,
where
I love
it's
ambient music, of course, and that to me is chill music, not like shaman stuff. And like I am absolutely immediately turned off by acoustic guitar and like somebody singing,
well,
unless it's like dark
I
folk
don't like
or
folk
something.
music. I hate folk music.
Well, I mean, just like you have people like we share a radio in the kitchen at work. Some people put on just something with the guy strumming an acoustic guitar and just singing. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Who
Oh
wants
yeah,
to hear this? I don't want to
Jack
hear some
Johnson.
asshole with sandals and hairy toe knuckles singing about how he lost his joint in the mountains and now his girlfriend broke up with him and his only friend is his dog. Who gives a fuck? Fuck
Well,
that kind
I hope you recorded that because those are the lyrics for my next folk album.
of the folk album coming out. What's it called?
It's called
Hose out my asshole because I haven't showered in a year. I'm a
it's called
hippie.
it's called folk you.
Not you
Um,
personally, but
no, I mean when I like for me chill music is either like I don't know what you call it like where it's almost like jazz music with electronic beats.
I
Is it
gotta
like
say something right now because you said
dub?
jazz. There's a kid at my work, I've told you about him. He's like really into Godflesh because I got him into that, but he loves like Swans and like really noisy guitar rock, but he loves indie rock and like what's the term? I can't remember the term, but it's like Sonic Youth, bands like that.
Is it like noise rock or
They're noisy, but they're older. Like it's older, like rock kind of chorus stuff, but sometimes it's pop, like their newer stuff.
avant-garde indie?
So
I don't know.
Like Boris, like that Japanese, just drony noise doom heavy band.
I hate
I got
that
him
stuff.
into Godflesh and stuff, and he can appreciate stuff like Napalm Death. Or I had Bathory on the other night, and I was closing up the restaurant. And he's like, "Oh, that's a sick riff, bro," and he likes everything, but he's really into jazz. And to me, I'm sorry, and I know everybody out there, especially metal guys, I don't fucking get it with jazz. What's the attraction? It's boring to me. Sorry. Is that because I don't do drugs too? But also the music just
no.
I'm like, whatever.
Well, I don't know. Like, I mean, my dad is a jazz piano player, so I was kind of raised with it. So to me, there's just compositionally, jazz is interesting. I mean, they're
says compositionally and like in some ways jazz created metal or this or that. I'm like, okay, whatever.
I wouldn't say that, but I would say like there's a certain rebelliousness about jazz that maybe parallels metal. It kind of started as a almost like a middle finger to just traditional music. You know what I mean? So it shares some of the sort of recalcitrant aspects of metal. And then, from a technical standpoint, compositional standpoint, it's just very, very involved, So you can get as cerebral as you want with jazz, or you can listen to it passively, which is kind of what's nice about it. It makes like kind of nice background music, but then you can throw on, some Miles Davis and really just dissect and try to reverse engineer the composition and just have your mind blown by just how I don't know, sophisticated it is. So, but you're a fan of Steely Dan, dude, and that's what sets Steely Dan apart from just Crosby, Stills and Nash. You know what I mean? Is they're just super sophisticated jazz sensibilities that makes it just above everything else in that sort of sound,
Well, I suppose there's lots of jazz breakdowns and stuff, or influence type of jazz influence stuff in metal, and maybe I don't see it because I don't listen to jazz, but I do get it in Steely Dan, which because a lot of these same kids that I work with don't like Steely Dan. I think it's boring ass, stupid old shit from the 70s, old farts. Like I'm like, well, actually, they wrote the book on fusing jazz and rock together. I don't care who the fuck you like, Miles Davis or not. Steely Dan is the shit too. They totally deserve.
Oh yeah, you
can't
recognize that.
Dan's like one of the best concerts I have ever seen, and I've seen Kiss make up all of it. Steely Dan was fucking hot live. I couldn't believe it. So good.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I really wish I would have gotten to see them because.
But you also got to appreciate. I like the vibe they have because it's like this.
But that's the chill. Like, I mean, it's a very kind of.
It is. It's like this gentle, soft rock stuff, but it also reminds me of the 70s because I was a kid in the 70s, and that shit was just everywhere. It was on the radio, and now you hear it like in grocery stores and at the bank, and shit like doctor's offices. You're like, oh yeah, Steely Dan. It's just kind of funny.
Yeah.
You even hear Twisted Sister at the grocery store now.
I was going to say, I've been hearing hair metal, at the. Like, well, it just shows how old we are.
Twisted Sister, Steely Dan, and then whoever some of the music is. But
Sade. So, like, there's another one. Do you like Sade? Do you like that kind of?
I love Sade. She's fucking beautiful, first of all, and secondly, she's got a great voice, and that's jazz there. Let me ask you this.
Because one of my favorite bands is Swing Out Sister, which is Swing Out Sister.
What's that?
It's kind of Sade-ish, but it's just a different, maybe a little more upbeat than Sade, not as sultry, but just kind of that same.
Sultry and sexy. Now, let me ask you this: do you find that kind of music, or in particular saxophone, is outdated and it's like 90s? I kind of feel like that's the case.
It depends on how it sounds. Like that kind of I don't know if it's a soprano sax, you know, that Kenny G sort of sound.
Yeah,
That is dated, but
that
a
stuff's
good
outdated for sure. But I'm talking like Sade, where it's like
no, dude,
that
that stuff
swanky, sexy, just kind of mid
not at
tempo.
all.
She's singing over it, and it's like saxophone. It's like
No, not I
that's
don't think it's
outdated.
dated. No, not at all. I think that style of music is actually pretty timeless sounding.
It's funny
Like
because there's a science fiction show from the 90s called Babylon 5, and that's actually where they got the idea for Star Trek Deep Space Nine. They love both shows, but Babylon 5 was very, very 90s. They had even had a neon Zima sign in
the
the bar on the space station. Set
drink
on
of
the
the
space station,
future.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, give me a break. And
garbage.
no, it's not a beer, it's a Zima. So when you say, hey, let's go have a beer, you're gonna say, let's have a Zima. Like, get the fuck out of here. It tastes like pencil lead with carbonated water. It's fucking
Yeah,
crap. That's
if I
why it's
wanted
not.
that, like, yeah, I'll have a shot of tequila and a Sprite if I'm gonna. That's my version of a Zima, but
Well, on Babylon 5, there was one episode where the doctor, and this is a cool show because it's really more realistic than Star Trek. The doctor was addicted to painkillers, so he took a sabbatical from his job and went down into the bowels of the station where they have homeless people and stuff living and drug addicts. And he went into a bar that he didn't know existed down there, and there's a black girl on stage singing over some very Sade-ish, jazzy pop rock. And I'm like, wow, this is so dated, man. This is kind of bad. But and she was singing like that, I think I remember, like
li-
the saxophone. All the guys have like the
uh,
curly ringlet, long hair, and like
like I
the
said, I
jack.
think it's the context. I think the context it just like there's a certain like almost just sonic quality, but I'd say like maybe that sounded dated, but I like Sade specifically, I don't think her stuff sounds dated at all. In fact, like just about every one of those, like Sade, Swing Out Sister, Baja. I can't think of another one, but I know there's a
I think
couple
it's like
more.
Steely Dan, where it's very
Yeah,
indicative of the time, but it's still good. I don't know. It's hard to say.
yeah. Well, Dan, I mean, their recordings were just so pristine. Like this, just the production value holds up, which is probably why Steely Dan never really sounds that dated,
And did
unless
you
you're talking
know
about like their first album or first two albums.
there was a guy named Jeff Skunk Baxter? You probably know the name, but he was one of those jack of
Oh
all
yeah,
musicians from the
yeah.
70s.
He was Doobie Brothers and Steely Dan, and then he
Big
went into
New York
military
name.
contract.
Yeah, big New York name. And then, of course, Michael McDonald, the original Doobie Brothers singer, was also the original.
Fuck!
Yeah, there you go. And
Oh yeah.
anyway, Jeff Skunk Baxter had like a lot of relation to Kiss. So like there was like early stuff where Kiss had him try out for the band and like stuff he did on their solo albums or this or that in the studio.
Kiss
On
didn't
Kiss
hire him
albums, I knew
because
who was
they
playing. 'Cause Ace and Peter always weren't there a lot of the time, or Gene and Paul would kind of secretly replace their shit they did if it wasn't up to par with someone else and not tell them.
Oh, I know that, man. Anton Fig played on most of the Kiss stuff, I think.
On the Dynasty album and the one that followed it, Unmasked, on Ace's solo album. That's all Anton Fig.
Oh yeah. And you know what? Speaking of Unmasked, that album gets a bad rap. I think it's a good album. One of my
I
favorite
knew you were
Kiss
going to
albums.
say that because everybody I know that likes Kiss or doesn't like Kiss, they bring that album up, and like all the guys who hate what I like and like what I hate, like you and your friend Doug, love that fucking record. And I have to say, I don't really hate that record. It's a Kiss album. If you listen to it, it's really good for like 80s soft rock, disco, slide of disco theme, but like soft pop rock.
hmm
And it's a really good album for that. But it shows Gene and Paul lost their fucking minds because that Dynasty, first of all, really hurt their career because it was a disco song. Back then, that was anathema. Like, you shouldn't have done that, although I love that record. That's one of my favorite
hmm
Kiss records, Dynasty.
Yeah. So
And
that
it's
makes
not
you
really
kind of a
a
weird
disco
Kiss
album
fan
either.
too.
There's like one song, that song's the disco one. The
Yeah,
rest of
I
it's
would
pretty
think
good
for like
rock.
uh-huh.
Like Ace Frehley came out of his shell on that album. He sung 3 songs and like they were good songs. Great rock album, Dynasty, but they hurt their career doing that, and they needed Unmasked, which was soft pop rock. That made it worse. And then they did a concept album following
The
that.
Elders.
The Elder, which is also a good album. And
That's a good album. Yeah,
they hate that record, but it's for a non-existent movie. So first of all, people were confused, like, what the fuck? Is this a movie or what is this shit? And then they're like,
Well,
it's just singing about honor and glory and like doing the right thing. They're telling us before this to go fuck as many girls as you can. And I'm like, okay. But what I'm getting at is Kiss missed the boat because they were busy doing disco and soft rock, while the punk movement, the new wave movement, and the heavy metal movement were all starting up in England.
Mm-hmm.
And then they delivered us Creatures of the Night, which is arguably the heaviest fucking album of all time. And I don't give a fuck what anyone says. I'll fucking fight you. That album rules.
I think our next show is just going to be us fighting, because I think Animalize.
We're already fighting. I know you're going to say something next that's going to piss me off. Like, oh no,
the best Kiss. But I wanted to ask you: isn't Music from the Elder? Isn't that the first one that Vinnie Vincent played guitar on?
No, that's the first one that Eric Carr, the drummer, played on, who's my favorite drummer of all time, because he's fucking extremely underrated by everybody. Super talented guy.
No, I listened to those.
He's heavy as fuck. Albums. If you listen to his drumming, he was also fast. He pushed them to be a heavier, faster band, like we were talking last week. Even on Animalize, he made them much faster.
Well, no, he's not on Animalize.
Yes, he is.
No, that's Eric Carr.
Yeah, Eric Carr.
Okay, wait, no, I was thinking of who's their current drummer? Eric
Singer. Yeah, no, that's not till later.
I was thinking of Eric Singer. Sorry.
No, Eric Carr is the guy who had the Fox makeup.
Yeah.
And then when they did Creatures of the Night, the next album, that was Eric pushing them to be heavier because of his playing style. Because unlike Peter Criss, he was influenced by Zeppelin, Sabbath, all that stuff. Then that's Vinnie Vincent.
He was Bonham. He was kind of like John Bonham with a little more, probably a little more finesse.
If you have not heard Creatures of the Night all the way through, fucking do it. Even the Paul Stanley ballad is heavy on there. It's fucking great album. So heavy.
Okay. All right.
Stuff there is. I don't give a shit who you are. You've heard.
Challenge accepted. Now listen. I want you to listen to Animalize all the way through again. You need some fresh airs on that one.
I heard it not too terribly long ago. It's like I said last time, we were talking about this, and like even Asylum, for as horrible as that record is, if you go back and listen to it, they really are tuned down pretty heavy on that record.
Oh, well, and even Revenge is pretty good.
And that's why it's silly for Kiss to do that, because they have deep voices and they play heavy, and they're trying to, and then it's raining. Like, get out of here! Stop that.
Their ballads started to kind of suck towards the end, and that's probably why I liked Animalize, because it was like their last one without a ballad. There's no ballad, and I know you say Thrills in the Night is a ballad, but I argue it's actually
it is, but it's heavier. But
it's about a hooker.
But like we said, like Paul Stanley took over the band at that point, and he's practical songwriting about like pop and sensibility and like basic rock, but also like getting money and attention and all of that, and hit singles.
Mm-hmm.
Gene's the guy who gave us God of Thunder and all that kind of. Well, actually, Paul wrote that song, but Gene made it his own. But that's the heavy shit. Like Gene was the heavy guy in that band, the dark guy. But Eric Carr, like so fucking heavy, and he's the first drummer I've ever seen play 4 kick drums.
Yeah, but talk about
Nick Caro of Twisted Sister did it, but I saw Eric Carr do it first. So either way,
and he's such a tiny little guy.
He's a little guy. He's a powerhouse.
You see those pictures like Honey, I Shrunk the Drummer.
Honey, I Shrunk the Drummer.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, his hair was huge though. But anyway, Eric Carr was so heavy, and Vinnie Vincent was actually a really, really good guitarist.
I love it.
I think Vinnie Vincent's becoming a woman now, isn't he?
It looks like it, but I think so. Okay, so I think Vinnie Vincent, maybe he was kind of crazy, maybe he wasn't. But I think that environment, sometimes being in Kiss, like, look, you don't really have a lot to say in that band. It's Gene and Paul, right? And they run a tight ship. So I think that could really kind of put a number on you psychologically, especially when it came down to like money and publishing and things like that. I think Vinnie Vincent kind of got screwed out of his publishing for songs that he probably wrote that he didn't get.
They were trying to keep it looking like Ace was in the band, because they were horrified about what was going to happen if they lost Peter, then they lost Ace. That's the whole thing. Ace was not on that fucking record, Creatures of the Night. He wasn't.
Okay, so that's the first. That goes back to my question. That was the first Vinnie Vincent
That was the first Vinny Kiss album, and the irony of irony is the first song on that album, the solo you hear, is by a guy named Steve Ferris, who was in Mr. Mister.
Mister, yeah.
Like that 80s
Well,
song.
yeah. Well, Steve Ferris, he also he played in Whitesnake for a little while too.
Oh, really? See, that's what's cool about the 80s is you could have people who just played rock and music, and it didn't matter if it was this or
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Now there's no music anymore. It's like, well, fuck, all we have is pop bullshit and R&B hip hop garbage and all of that shit.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, I don't know if you've listened or read the Steve Lukather book. That's pretty interesting. You know who he is, right?
We went over this last week. I forgot. He was in.
He was in Toto.
Oh yeah, that's right, Toto.
But basically, Toto is pretty much the backing band for Michael Jackson's Thriller. They wrote a lot of that album, and everyone in Toto plays on Michael Jackson's Thriller. Arguably
So what's the truth
biggest album of all time.
Thriller, like with Beat It, is that Eddie Van Halen or not? Because I heard Eddie Trunk say it's not Van Halen.
Oh, it's Eddie Van Halen for sure. Steve Stevens, I think, did a version of it. So I think when they were looking, because they were specifically looking for like a rock shredder guy to do that solo. And at first, I think they got Steve Stevens from Billy Idol.
Yeah.
And he might be like, he's not as reckless as like sounding as Eddie Van Halen. So I think they still wanted something a little more off the rails sounding. So like Eddie Van Halen came and did like 2 takes. They spliced the best ones together, and that's it.
Maybe that's what he was saying. I don't remember, but yeah, he's not on the whole album though. It's just that song.
Oh, no,
solo.
just,
right? Not even the whole song, right?
Yeah, just the solo, like literally just the guitar solo. Everything else on that, all the other guitars are played by Steve Lukather.
Interesting. And not too long after that, what did Toto give us but the soundtrack to Dune?
Yeah, you know what? I have to check that out again because I remember hating everything about Dune except for the soundtrack when I first seen it, you know.
The soundtrack's not bad. It's very 80s, new 80s science fiction, like on a Blade Runner kind of level of things, but like a different take on it. But
yeah. Interesting, that's just kind of coming back, isn't it?
Bad, terrible.
Yeah. That sound, believe it or not, there's a timeless quality because now you see that sound coming back with like Stranger Things, and I don't know, what do they call? There's actually a genre of electronic music that's pretty much just that 80s.
Numerous different titles for it, but I think synthwave is one.
Synthwave. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
I think the biggest band is going to be, I can't remember their name, like Electrohawk or Cyberhawk or some hawk.
No, you're thinking of a Flight. Oh God, no.
No, there's a band, something Hawk something Cyberhawk, or I can't remember, but
Night Flight Orchestra. Have you heard them?
No, are they from the old video channel?
No. Okay, so they're another band that's like kind of taken that 80s pop sound and really just with production just made it sound awesome. No, it's actually members of like a melodic death metal band called Soilwork. but they have like another project called Night Flight Orchestra where it's just that real 80s like kind of Phil Collins era Genesis, but more synthy. It's really good.
Now, this is what we were going to talk about. This was our plan for the first show, is like the beginnings of rock. We got already like steered off with like the Gore covers and then Marijuana and then all that and jazz. But
yeah, I guess
beginnings of rock. We were talking about Kiss.
Or
first and foremost, I'm going to put this out there. Like, yes, Black Sabbath started heavy music. I got it.
Yeah. So
Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Pink Floyd up to a point. But
we can't do any better than Sam Dunn.
Than what?
Samuel Dunn. Dude, he's the guy from that metal documentary.
Why did you just launch his name into there?
I was just saying, well, I was trying to be facetious.
Oh, I get that.
We couldn't do better than Sam Dunn. That's the history.
They have ketchup flavored potato chips up there, for God's sake.
They also have Voivod.
Yeah, Voivod's overrated to me. Yeah, sorry.
Well, this is not going to be good when we start trying to get interviews with members of Voivod.
Should I not give my opinion? I mean, who says we're going to do that anyway?
I don't
No,
know. That's
yeah, I like them. I'm not that into
I
them.
would I would
Some
I would
people,
like to maybe like every once in a while bring someone in and be like, hey,
they're the Tool of the
Snake,
under metal
play
scene.
bud.
He thinks Tool is God, and like I'm like, okay, yeah, well, I don't see it, but whatever.
Tool was the most boring concert I've ever been to in my entire life.
Oh yeah, what
Yeah.
do you like them musically, or is it just kind of either
No,
here?
they're boring music. I mean, they're good. Like they're one of those bands that like have all the elements that I should technically like, but just assembled in a way that just doesn't do it for me. It's too
Too deep up.
drony,
Talking
too.
about.
And it's not even that it's too dark. It's too depressing. I like dark. I just don't like depressing. You know.
See, that's
So,
what I'm talking about. Is like there
so
are
I don't
bands
like Pink
that people
Floyd.
think that you have to like, and that you have all these things where you think you have to like this band, but there's just something not there.
Hmm.
That's why I don't like musicians like music, like prog. I don't love prog at all, like Dream Theater, because it's just like people like playing music for other musicians. And I don't think Tool's 100% that band, but they're kind of, I don't know, they have that vibe that you hard to say. Like, I don't know if you want to, not pompous, but like there's something like kind of an arrogance about them. Or maybe it's their fans, because I can
Probably the
definitely say
fans.
it's their fans that I really hate. It's just
Oh
like
yeah.
bands had these fans too. Like in the 80s, it was Rush. Like if you didn't like Rush in the 80s, but you liked metal, you were a fuck up and everybody gave you shit. Like, yeah, I like Rush. Tom Sawyer. Oh, Tom Sawyer fucking stupid the radio, blah, blah, blah. Don't you know about 2112? Like, okay, whatever. I don't care that much. Thank
Oh
you.
man.
And not only that,
Oh
almost
boy.
I'm like, first of all, you wouldn't have Rush if it wasn't for motherfucking Kiss, because Kiss took them on tour, and you wouldn't
I
have these
love
names,
Rush.
Rush, any of that shit, because Kiss took them out on tour.
But we're not talking about who took who on tour. We're just
Who
talking
made
about
who?
like music. Yeah.
Well, my point is they got exposed and broke big because of Kiss. But
Sure.
anyway, with Tool, it's like I don't hate them. It's like I don't love their music. I don't get into it. And when they came out, it was in the '90s when I was extremely diving into grindcore, death metal, black metal. So it was like, okay, well, who are these guys? They're just like 10-minute long songs about some guy singing about whatever. It just didn't move me. Like Alice in Chains, none of that stuff grabbed me. Nirvana, it was just there.
Oh, I hated grunge, and that's actually my part of my fondness for Dream Theaters because they gave me like a different avenue when grunge was starting to hit big because I was hair metal up until then, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, it's not cool to play guitar solos anymore, and you're supposed to be just sort of depressed and raggedy and shit. And then I was like, well, this sucks. And then Dream Theater's Images and Words came out. And I'm like, oh, there's people that still like care about certain abilities on music, and it basically, like I told you, there. If it wasn't for Dream Theater, I probably wouldn't even be into like any kind of death metal or extreme music
That is so
they're
weird to hear somebody say that.
because they were just like showed me like, okay, I've never heard the instrument push this far, so who else is doing this? And it's just trying to find out, all right, well, who's doing the same thing as Dream Theater, which is just crazy technicality, precision, compositional, just outside of the box sort of compositions and things like that. And I found it in death metal, because there was like the same level of musicianship in that genre, just played at higher volumes and more aggression, So,
See, and
but
same
yeah,
Dream Theater. It's like I get that they're good. I hear it. I'm just not interested. It doesn't. It's like listening to a lecture at school. Your teacher comes up and says, "We're going to talk about medieval history." They go on and on about this date, that date, this king, this queen, yada yada yada. I'm like, okay, well, what about Vlad the Impaler? That's who I want to learn about. Okay, Vlad the Impaler. He didn't actually drink blood, but he killed these guys in
well,
Crusade.
no, I
But I'm just
would say
saying,
that.
it's Dream Theater is so clinical and like clean, and Tool is like that, and it just doesn't do it for me. That's why you have a band like Kiss, like compared to them. Kiss are actually really good musicians, but they have a simple
No,
chorus verse punch, and it's done, and it's good. It grabs you and kicks your ass, and
no,
you're
I,
ready for the next
and
song. Not all
I'll
their
gi-
albums, of
I'll give
course.
you that, and for
That's what people like when they want music, though.
well,
That's
and if you
that's
said,
why.
okay, you could listen to either Dream Theater the rest of your life or Kiss for the rest of your life, and I would choose Kiss because one, it's just funner. Like, you know what I mean? There's that.
That's what I'm saying is when
I
you
like
have
the fun
time to listen to
element.
music, I don't want to get into this big extrapolating lesson on guitar work. I don't give a fuck. I just want to
But
hear something that like moves me, and that doesn't do it. Tool doesn't do it.
Kiss always had good guitar players though. So
And
like,
Rush doesn't do it either. Sorry, Rush guys. I like Rush. No, I have
uh,
nothing against them, but you know, it's just they're one of those proggy bands that I'm just like, okay, you know,
I don't
5 minutes now, I'm done. Is the song still going on? And
I think we need to have a day where me and you just spend the entire day forcing ourselves, forcing each other's music on each other. Like I'm gonna force you to
you do
listen to
that,
some
I
Rush.
hate it. Guarantee you, I'll talk shit the whole time.
I know, but I'll make you listen to some Rush tracks, some deep Rush tracks that you probably are not familiar with.
I like
And
Working Man from their first album. That's like a
Jesus
heavy,
Christ,
like cool song.
well, that's just like Led Zeppelin. I mean, but I would play some stuff on like Power Windows, like their synth, kind of like their '80s synth
What's
era.
the album that was big in the '80s that Rush did? It was like had keyboards on it. It was like a white album cover. It had like
Grace Under Pressure is
I
amazing.
think that's the one. Now that album was really weird, and nobody seems to know that record. No one talks about it.
Oh,
I heard that
it's what
record. That's
it's
actually pretty good.
amazing. Well, and that's what I'm saying. Like, dude, they have these kind of. It's a dark record for
Is
one.
that the one
Despite,
that has the world rest on my shoulder? What can
yeah,
I do? What's that
yeah,
song?
Between the Wheels,
Yeah, I remember that, and it was all over MTV. It was all
and
over
it had
heavy
the
metal
body
radio.
body
That wasn't
electric.
Rush. What?
Oh, no, that might have been Distant Early Warning. It's off that album, but there's like Body Electric, Distant Early Warning, Red Lenses, Between the Wheels,
I'm
Kid
pretty
Gloves.
sure it was Grace Under Pressure, and there was a video
Yeah,
for it and everything. It had like a bunch of like robotic people in a room or something, or
yeah, Distant Early Warning.
but it was
Yeah,
like lumped in with metal radio at the time because metal was coming out huge. Iron Maiden, Power Slave, Judas
uh
Priest, Defenders of the Faith, all that stuff. And that was out there, but it wasn't Rush at their heaviest. But they were doing this new wavy kind of stuff. I'm like, what the fuck? And
oh
it's like
yeah.
totally gone. Like Rush people don't talk about it. No one knows about this. But when you mention it, people are like, "Oh, you know about that album?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, of
Yeah,
course."
it's probably the most understated of their albums, and it's one of my favorites. Like, but
But that's what I would listen to all the way through because I think I'd like it. But like
Rush is
2112 and Fly By Night, I'm like, you know, whatever.
the thing
It's
is I don't consider Rush metal, although it's interesting. I was listening to an interview with Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson yesterday, ironically, and Geddy Lee refers to the band as a metal band, but I think Rush is hugely important to the metal genre. Carl Sanders from Nile worships Rush. Plenty of death metal guys will hold up Rush as just gods, So
well, yeah, like I said, I don't have a problem with Rush or even Dream Theater and Tool. But Rush I can get into because they are rock based. Tool, I'll be honest with you right now. I tend to talk a lot of shit on Tool mainly because of their fans. I fucking hate Tool fans. I want to punch them every time I meet them because they immediately just start shitting on you. It's like, oh, take off your shirt. Let me shit on your chest about Tool. Like, fuck you. Get out of here. I don't give a shit about Tool. Like, oh, don't you know they're the greatest band? Maynard, blah, 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 blah. Like,
yeah, Maynard.
there's like different layers in this music and they're talking about magic and theory and practice. Like, yeah, great. I'm
Nice.
going to be over here listening to Carbonized Eye Sockets by Carcass for a minute and a half. Fuck off. What the fuck about
No,
Tool?
I think my problem with Tool is believe it or not, like I think I rejected them purely out of like when they came out. They came out with I lumped them in with grunge, believe it or not.
Well, that's how they are. They're
They
loved
were just kind of part of that same
and Marilyn
depressing.
Manson and that scene. They're all a part of that, you know. And they're not anything like those bands. I'll give them the credit where it's due.
Yeah.
They're good musicians. Their music's not bad. I don't mind it, but it's just not something I listen to very much. It's just too long and involved and like.
It's not even involved. It's too drony for me. Like it almost just
I
has a
throw stuff,
repetitive.
but if I'm doing that, I'm going to do doom or ambient or just noise guitars and whatever, like Godflesh or something. Or
Yeah, I don't think I'd like Godflesh.
but that's the thing is like, I don't know. Like if I'm going to listen to something like deep and involved, I guess maybe it's just an age factor or where I came from. Like last night, I was at work closing down the restaurant and I had Coroner radio on Pandora, but Iron Maiden came on the live version of Phantom of the Opera. I'm like, oh, I haven't heard this in a while, and that's a good song. You know, it's really good. That's long and involved for me. Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, Phantom of the Opera, like. 15 minutes of like just somebody strumming a guitar and like some guy coming in singing about drugs or whatever the fuck. It's like, okay, I'm done with this. 5, 10
That's
minutes ago.
that's weird that you're kind of like you're kind of anti-prog, but you have a Coroner radio station, and Coroner is like the prog thrash band
No,
out
not
there.
even, dude. There's so many other bands that are proggy. Like, what about like Wrath and Satan and all those old bands and Atheist even and
Well, yeah, but I'd say Coroner
Cynic,
was one
Sadist?
of the well, yeah, the Coroner was kind of one of the first to really start
You
adding
think that? I
progressive
don't know.
elements to
I think
thrash.
Coroner started off as like a really good thrash band, kind of trying to be like their band they were roadies to, Celtic Frost, but then they kind of like veered off into this rock thing, I think.
I love
By the
Coroner.
time their third record or fourth record actually, Mental Vortex, I think, came out, they were
Mental
doing like
Vortex.
a cover of Sheep
That's
Heavy by the Beatles, and that was good.
that's one of my favorite albums. Yeah, that song
Really? That one
Sirens
lost me. I thought
is
it was kind of boring, but it came on the other night, and I'm like, maybe this isn't such a bad album. I need
oh,
to
it's so
listen to
good.
it again.
Yeah, that song Sirens is amazing. One of my favorite all
What about the
time.
one after it, Grin? Like that album, is that any good? Because that song
Yeah,
from that came on, and it was like, I don't know.
it's um well, I was gonna actually compare it to like Swan Song, but because I like Swan Song from Carcass,
Oh, for God's sake!
but
Seriously?
it's me. Swan Song is like,
What
well,
did I tell you?
I guess
Getting
we're
back.
not going to be interviewing Bill Steer anytime soon.
Oh, fuck. How about that? If they want to come on, I mean, I'm opinionated, but I still love these bands. They're all cool guys, but like we met Carcass. I met Carcass when they were here on the Heartwork tour. And I'm like, Jeff, dude, you didn't play anything from the first two albums. You only played one from Necroticism. What the fuck, dude? And he's like, well, we can't play that stuff forever, And I'm like, well, yeah, but I mean, why not, really? But then you still just didn't play anything. You played all Heartwork, and there's nothing. It's like Creator. That's what it sounds like to me. Is Creator's albums like Coma of Soul?
What?
They shirked all of the pathological shit. They're not heavy anymore. And I get their
They're
guitarists
all over the
show off
place.
what they can do, okay, and they have to progress, but
You're saying that's not heavy. What is heavy? Like, I don't know. Like, to me, Carcass, I think Heartwork's heavy as hell.
well, you know what? It's a heavy thrash album, but
Was it too melodic? Like,
yeah, I guess. I mean, that's what it was. I don't know. Like, I guess in a way, he's right. Of course, they can't play that forever and have gory album covers, forensic lyrics, but at the same time, you can't
gotta admit, man,
not
that
your roots either and forget it. But why can't you just have a different band or just have a little bit of that in some of the songs? I mean, that's who you are. Napalm Death is still playing the same shit. They're still touring. They're still pretty popular. I mean,
yeah, and there's
as far as I know, they don't have to work. I mean,
and there's Napalm Death is big friends with Dream Theater.
well,
Did
I
you know that?
Martin did Damage Incorporated with them, didn't he?
Yeah.
Is
But
that where you
come on.
first heard death metal?
No. First, like my transition into death metal was pretty kind of gradual, but I'd say Cynic's Focus was my first kind of experiment into death metal. It was like friendly death metal. Like it was like here, we're not gonna just like throw you into the deep end. We're gonna like have sort of jazz new age metal music with some death vocals over the top. And then I bought after that I bought Individual Thought Patterns by Death, which could technically be a death metal album, but I don't even consider death metal at that point. They're more like and I don't even think Chuck Schuldiner would have considered himself death metal. He was trying to kind of move
That's
away
another
from
one.
that.
Chuck Schuldiner was, from what I know, he was a really nice guy. Of course he was. He was talented as fuck. His band was good. I wasn't into what they did after the first album. I didn't even like the second one.
Mm-hmm.
And I get why people like them, but I didn't play it on my radio show back in the day. I'm like, it's not heavy. It's just guitar. And I'm not into guitar noodling. And again, that's the shit that like all the guitarists in the audience want to hear because they like that. That's probably why they like Dream Theater. So I'm like, well, okay, but everybody else, they want to hear this heavy shit like Incantation or whatever the fuck. Like,
Well,
I mean, we don't want to hear
the first. I was gonna say the first death metal album that I could say is pure death metal, which you still would be bugged about, was Cannibal Corpse, Evisceration Plague. which
Yeah,
is
and
like
I don't like them
and that's
because
like their fourth album with Corpse Grinder, and that was like
well,
their fourth or fifth album with Corpse Grinder, so that's like way into their career. But it was the first like full on like, okay, I'm jumping in, no going back after this. So that
but
was the
Cannibal Corpse also do, and this is American death metal, and why I don't like it is they're all about clean, classically clinical precision recording and tons and tons of riffing and solos and fretboard.
yeah, I love
That's
that
just
though.
like I don't want to hear that. That's not death metal to
I do. Because to me, death metal is an extension of thrash, which is just about riffs. So to me, it's all about riffs. It's like, can we have a
I
cool
think so
fucking
up
riff?
to a point, but the whole package has to be it. Otherwise, you're just a band with a guitarist showing off, and there's a lot of bands like that. Like
Yeah, I
it's
think
some
it's
of
a
the old
fine line.
thrash. So you know people from all these bands that I hate. Like, are you gonna bring them on this show and be like, "Yeah, this guy hates you"? Like, oh
That
hey,
hates you. No, not gonna do that. What I gather from you, JR, I could be wrong,
yes,
is
Mark.
that I think you're very reactionary and impulsive about some of your opinions. I think some of these bands you
I'm
just
an
haven't
opinionated
given it,
motherfucker, is what you're saying.
but I think you've given like almost like a passing listen to a lot of these bands, and then just like, well, that's not for me, and then that and you moved on. And I think if you were to listen with just a little more of a
You may be right
perspective.
because a lot of that I listened to back in the day in the 90s, especially doing my radio show when I was like extremely eager to hear more Carcass, General Surgery, Pathologist, Carbonize, like all these bands, Sonic Violence, Entombed, and like each and every one of them either disappeared or changed. And then when I did the radio show, you had people constantly calling saying they wanted to hear Human by Death. You guys,
No, that and well, the thing that's so cool about that album is
and no
that
disrespect to Chuck,
well, Human is my favorite Death album because the
because you're a
guitar player, well, the guitar player and the drummer is basically Cynic. It's
yeah,
almost a
the
Cynic
whole
album.
band, like most of Death's, the rest of their career was basically those Cynic guys, wasn't it?
No, no, because Human was the last of like the Cynic. Because after Human, Cynic formed Cynic, and then after that,
Well,
he
Cynic was
had.
always around. That's the thing. They just never got an album out until around that
uh
time, like way after that, it kept getting delayed because those guys kept playing in everybody else's band. Do you like Pestilence?
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, that was gonna say like that might have been I might have even gotten Pestilence before Cannibal Corpse, which was but it was
On the third,
the
fourth
Spheres album.
records, it's the guys from Cynic again.
Is it on Spheres?
Spheres, and then the one before that, Testimony of the Ancients. It's two or three guys, or actually maybe even just one guy, but it's somebody
No
from Cynic
way.
or Sadis is in there too. Yeah, and that's a good album. I like that album, Testimony of the Ancients, because there's a
Well,
lot
what
of
about Spheres? I mean, that's the one I started with Pestilence.
I didn't never hear that one because from what I was told, it was by that time death metal was already like on its last leg because black metal came out and just kicked the shit out of it. And like that album to me, I heard what I heard of it was like really just again stuff that you would like, proggy, guitarsy,
Hmm.
not quite so heavy death metal like in the death human realm of things. But since then, Pestilence is back to normal.
It
But
doesn't
yeah,
even
if you
have
haven't
the
heard Testimony of the Ancients, you should check that out. Like it's I like that album. That's because Pestilence does so many like signature riffing that nobody else did, like that crazy just sliding.
Are you sure? Do you know? Are you sure? Because I'm on the Pestilence wiki page, and it doesn't have any of the members of.
Well, I have the CD. I can go get it and read it to you. It's Tony
Actually,
Joy of Cynic and some other dude.
Tony Choi wasn't in Cynic. Oh, I think he was an atheist.
I'm
But
pretty sure he was in Cynic and or Sadus at one point.
yeah, let's see, former members. Okay, hold on. Okay,
Oh,
Tony Choi was in it. Oh, a bunch of different. But Tony Choi is the only one I can that's familiar to me. And Tony Choi was an atheist, and I think he was in Cynic for about 5 minutes before Sean Malone
well, there's a
replaced.
Cynic album that he's on. I'm pretty sure, but I don't know. That's your territory, not mine.
No, no, he's not on any Cynic album.
But
Well, no,
I think
actually, he might be
it
on
says
their demo.
yeah, I think it even says on the Pestilence CD, Tony Choi Cynic or something, or session player on this album. or
Okay, so
something.
Tony Choi, I'm looking
And I
at his
remember
disc.
reading a review too of that record of the Pestilence album. Someone in a magazine, Metal Edge or somebody, was like, "This is a great record." Blah blah blah. Now can't somebody please sign Tony's band Cynic and put their album out finally? And
Okay, so
yeah.
Tony Choi played on the Cynic demo, but he didn't play on the actual Focus release, the official release. And then he went and played Atheist, Unquestionable Presence, and Elements, and Testimony of the Ancients, but he's not on Spheres.
Well, regardless, you need. Well, I don't know who's on Spheres, but I just
But
know it's.
he also played on 2009 Pestilence, Resurrection Macabre. That's
Oh,
interesting. Is he
really?
still alive? I thought he
Who?
died. Tony Choi.
I don't know.
He's still alive. Good. I don't know. I know one of those bass players of the old Florida scene passed away.
I
Sean
think
Malone died.
John Reinert, maybe.
Well, he's the drummer. Sean Reinert died during like the COVID thing, and so did Sean Malone, the bass player for Cynic. It's kind of sad. He committed
Yeah.
suicide during the lockdown. Kind of shitty. That's a good note to end on.
Yeah.
Oh, rest in peace, all our fallen metal brothers.